Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good evening, distinguished friends, and thank you for coming to this press conference on a short notice. I had indeed asked to speak before the Security Council this afternoon as it adopted the presidential statement. Unfortunately, due to what was termed procedural considerations, they refused to allow me to speak. I will not use your or abuse your indulgence to read to you the statement that I had intended to make before the Security Council, because I don't want to ruin your dinner plans. But what I intend to do is to simply go over a few facts that I wanted to bring to the attention of the Security Council. Then I'll be happy to answer whatever questions that you may have. I wanted to remind the Security Council of the way it had treated Iran. And I wanted to start by doing that by reminding them about what happened about 55 years ago, when Iranians led a movement in the developing world to take into their own hands their destiny by nationalizing their oil industry. A permanent member of the Security Council who did not want me to speak today asked for a meeting of the Security Council, and in the resolution that it distributed, although it was not adopted, it said, concerned at the dangers inherent in the dispute regarding the oil installations in Iran and the threat to international peace and security which may thereby be involved. I do not believe the story has changed today. It is still about a country, a developing country, attempting to exercise its inalienable right recognized in the Treaty on Non-Proliferation. It is a right on which the foundations of the treaty are based, and it is a right which is not simply a legalistic argument, but in fact what keeps the international non-proliferation regime sustaining and continuing to exist, because international regimes cannot be sustained by threats. International regimes can be sustained only by accepting all the obligations and the rights that are inherent and enshrined in those international instruments and treaties, so that the incentives of being a party to those treaties would outweigh the disincentives of the obligations that you undertake by accepting those treaties. It is absolutely imperative for the continuation and for the relevance of international instruments that being a member would carry benefits in addition to the obligations, and being a non-member would not entitle you to have the benefits without having the obligations. Unfortunately today, the attempts by certain permanent members of the Security Council are moving the non-proliferation regime in that direction, and that is an extremely dangerous proposition. And I wanted to bring that to the attention of the Security Council. I also wanted to remind the Security Council of its own record with regard to aggression, the use of chemical weapons, the fact that a permanent member who is now making a lot of noise about concerns on weapons of mass destruction, at that time stated very clearly that it doesn't matter how people are killed, whether by bullet or by gas. And I have the quotes to give it to you. I wanted to present those to the Security Council if I had been allowed. Now, I also wanted to tell them what is involved in the Iran nuclear case. First of all, Iran's commitment to the non-proliferation regime, to non-proliferation, is categorical. We have always made it a very clear proposition that Iran is committed to its obligations not only because there are obligations under the treaty, but in fact because they are based in our historical as well as our religious edicts. We have made it very clear that at the highest level of the government, Iran does not want nuclear weapons, nor does it want to pursue the development, stockpiling, or acquisition of these inhuman weapons. I took the case of inadmissibility of use of nuclear weapons to the International Court of Justice, where unfortunately some members who are now making a lot of noise about those argued that in fact the use of nuclear weapons was legal under certain circumstances. It is also based on historical facts. For 250 years, Iran has not invaded any country. Iran was a victim of chemical weapons, and as you can see from the records of the United Nations, notwithstanding certain claims by those who were trying to whitewash Iraqi crimes at that time, including the United States, that Iran never used chemical weapons, even in retaliation. And this is very well recorded in the annals of the United Nations. Also, for strategic reasons, Iran believes that acquisition of nuclear weapons is dangerous to its security and would be detrimental to its security, and that is why we have made this commitment very clearly. It is only about Iran's rights, and rights are there in the treaty, and they cannot be arbitrarily played with. You remember at certain times Iran's development of even a power plant was obstructed by the United States. Until 2003, the United States was doing its very best to prevent the Russian Federation from providing Iran with the Bushehr power plant. Their statements today trying to change that historical fact, notwithstanding that the United States is not against Iran having nuclear technology. In fact, only a few months ago, statements on the record were made that Iran does not need nuclear power and nuclear technology. They have tried to present this as a case of concealment or even a case of non-compliance. And the facts are very clear on those. Iran's behavior under the NPT has been presented by the IAEA Director General time and again, and each time the Director General has clearly stated the conclusion, to the chagrin of some, that there has been, in the undeclared activities of Iran, no indication, no evidence of any military activity. Now, one sentence, unfortunately, has been used in this resolution, in this presidential statement, that the IAEA is unable to conclude that there are no undeclared materials or activities in Iran. Unfortunately, they forgot to read the next sentence after that statement, where the IAEA Director General says that this, even for countries that have additional protocol in place, is a time-consuming process. And nobody could expect that in 3 years, after about 1,700 days of inspection in Iran. This is not happening. And if that was the case for bringing a case before the Security Council, I can tell you that 89 countries that are not members of the additional protocol and 37 of the 61 who are members of the additional protocol have not received this clean bill of health, so to speak, under the IAEA additional protocol. But the question that needs to be asked is, was there any new revelations that brought this to the Security Council? Or was it simply because Iran did not accept an unreasonable demand by the EU3 in their package of last August? I was involved in the negotiations for 2 years. Iran presented proposal after proposal, which would have provided objective guarantees that Iran's nuclear program would remain exclusively peaceful. But because of the arbitrary red lines that had been drawn by others, these proposals were not even considered, and then the EU3 presented in their package and asked Iran to make a legally binding commitment that it will not produce nuclear fuel.